The United Nations Security Council has listed Pakistan-based terrorist Abdul Rehman Makki as a global terrorist. The listing comes after China last year stalled India's bid to name the Lashkar-e-Taiba leader a global terrorist. Earlier, China had stalled India's bid to list Masood Azhar as a global terrorist at least 4 times in the last 10 years. The United Nations had finally designated Masood Azhar as a global terrorist in 2019, and the latest listing comes after a gap of 3 years and 8 months. China has finally removed its hold on the listing of the Pakistani-based terrorist. Reports suggest China may have come under international pressure to list Makki as a global terrorist. India and the United States have already listed Makki as a terrorist under their respective domestic laws. Makki has been involved in raising funds, recruiting and radicalizing youth to violence and planning attacks in India, especially in the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. India has welcomed the UN listing of the Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist.
We welcome the decision of the UN Security Council's ISI and Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee to list Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist Abdul Rehman Makki, who is also the brother-in-law of LET leader Hafiz Saeed. Makki has occupied various leadership roles in the LET, including raising funds for the organization. Threats from terrorist organizations in the region remain high, and listings and sanctions by the UN Security Council are an effective tool to curb such threats and dismantle terror infrastructure in the region. India remains committed to pursuing a zero-tolerance approach to terrorism and will continue to press the international community to take credible, verifiable and irreversible action against terrorism.
Makki is also the deputy chief of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and leads the political affairs department of the terrorist group. He's the brother-in-law of Hafiz Saeed, the founder of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Makki served as the head of the LET's foreign relations department. The Pakistani government had arrested him in 2019, after which he was convicted in 2020 on 1 count of terrorism financing and was sentenced to prison. However, despite these actions, the terror group Lashkar-e-Taiba remains active in Pakistan and continues to disturb peace and stability in the Indian Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The United States of America has become one of the first countries to react to the listing. Speaking to WION, a US Embassy spokesperson said Washington designated Abdul Rehman Makki as a global terrorist back in 2010, and the US government now welcomes all efforts to bring him to justice. India, along with the US, had jointly proposed Makki's listing in 2022. For more on this story, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal sent us this report from New Delhi.
India has welcomed the listing of Abdul Rehman Makki, who is the deputy Amir of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Now, we know that India had put up the listing of Makki last year along with 4 other Pak-based terrorists as well. And there was, of course, we know the Chinese bloc as well. The bloc by the Chinese lasted for 6 months when it comes to Makki specifically. And thereafter now China has removed its technical hold. So it's a big diplomatic victory for India. And we know the last time such development happened was when it comes to Masood Azhar way back in 2019. But nonetheless, we could see this year the listing of other 4 Pakistani terrorists also happening, provided the Chinese side does away with its technical hold. But essentially, development comes at a time when relationship between India and China remains frozen. But nonetheless, despite the Chinese attempt to essentially veto India's focus areas, especially when it comes to counter-terrorism, India has been able to convince the international community. And now, of course, China has also relented when it comes to listing of Pakistani terrorists. But it's a message to Islamabad that it needs to really stop cross-border terrorism when it comes to its neighbors, especially India, and a message from New Delhi as well that when it comes to diplomatic focus on the issue of counter-terrorism, that is something that will continue. With video journalist Chandrasekhar, Siddhant Sibal for WION in New Delhi.